Can you imagine people suddenly speaking languages they never studied? 2 millennia ago at Pentecost, something extraordinary happened. Today, neuroscience analyzes this phenomenon under the name of glossolalia. Was it a divine miracle or something our own mind can do? Let's unravel this mystery. The fascinating starting point for our discussion lies in an event richly detailed in the book of Acts of the Apostles in the Bible. Around 30 AD, in Jerusalem, Jesus' disciples were gathered when they were suddenly seized by something the text describes as a mighty rushing wind and flames, resting above their heads. However, what truly marked the event was what followed. They began to speak in other tongues. The biblical account is remarkably specific, stating the pilgrims from various nations, Parthians, Medes, Elamites, residents of Mesopotamia, Judea, Cappadocia, Pontus, Asia, Phrygia, Pamphylia, Egypt, Libya, and Rome heard the Galileans speaking fluently in their own native languages. This scene caused a mix of astonishment and perplexity. While some speculated the disciples were drunk, others marveled at what they could only interpret as an unprecedented divine miracle, an irrefutable sign of something supernatural at work. For the Christian faith, this event, historically known as Pentecost, is the outpouring of the Holy Spirit, a divine intervention that empowered the apostles to transcend linguistic barriers and proclaim the gospel message to a multicultural audience. This narrative is not just a fundamental theological pillar. It establishes the origin of a phenomenon that has intrigued humanity for centuries: the apparent ability to communicate in unknown languages. It is crucial, however, that as we investigate this phenomenon, we make a clear distinction between two main forms of what is popularly called speaking in tongues: xenolalia and glossolalia. Xenolalia refers specifically to the act of speaking a natural, existing language that the speaker has never formally learned. The Pentecost episode, as described in the Bible, is the quintessential example of xenolalia. The listeners on that day were not hearing mere incoherent sounds. They understood intelligible speeches in their own languages, which would imply a transmission of linguistic knowledge that the individual did not previously possessed through conventional means. This form is, for many, the most compelling proof of direct divine intervention, a true miracle that defies the natural laws of language acquisition. On the other hand, glossolalia describes the production of vocalizations that, while they may exhibit characteristics superficially resembling a language such as rhythm, intonation, and syllable repetition, do not correspond to any known or intelligible natural language. That is, they lack a consistent vocabulary or a grammatical structure recognizable and translatable by a trained linguist. It is this second form that we predominantly observe in many contemporary religious practices and which has become the subject of in-depth study by the scientific community. From Pentecost, where xenolalia is the main focus, speaking in tongues has evolved into a practice present in various religious traditions, and it is the starting point for our investigation. Was what happened that day a clear and unequivocal divine intervention, a singular event with profound spiritual meaning? Or are there other ways to understand this experience in light of modern knowledge and the capabilities of the human mind? This is the core of our exploration, where belief meets science in a quest for the most comprehensive understanding possible. The experience of speaking in tongues, or phenomena bearing remarkable similarities to it, is not an exclusive privilege of the Pentecost event. It resonates through diverse cultures and eras, transcending geographical, religious, and even historical boundaries. Throughout the annals of history, countless accounts describe individuals or groups who, in states of profound religious fervor, mystical trance, or even under conditions of extreme stress and emotional catharsis, utter sounds and words that are incomprehensible to external listeners, but are often interpreted internally as a divine, spiritual, or communication language with the invisible. In ancient Greece, for example, the legendary priestesses of the Oracle of Delphi, known as Pythias, in states of ecstasy possibly induced by subterranean vapors, herbs, or other ritual practice, emitted enigmatic vocalizations, uttering ambiguous words and guttural sounds that were then interpreted by priests, being considered direct messages from the gods. In various shamanic traditions, ubiquitously spread across the planet, from the Arctic to the Amazon, it is a common practice for shamans to enter altered states of consciousness to mediate between the human and spiritual worlds. In these trances, they frequently utter vocalizations that, according to local beliefs, are the voices of spirits, ancestors, or entities, serving as a crucial means of healing, prophecy, guidance, or communication with the beyond. In the Christian context, glossolalia experienced a remarkable re-emergence and global expansion from the early 20th century onwards, especially with the vigorous rise and spread of the Pentecostal movement and subsequently the charismatic movement within more traditional denominations. Millions of faithful worldwide report and experience speaking in tongues. For many, it is conceived as a personal spiritual gift of prayer, an intimate and inarticulable form of communication with God that transcends rational language and intellectual comprehension. For others, it is seen as a prophetic manifestation that, to be understood and edified by the community, requires divine interpretation. These accounts, often accompanied by moving testimonies of personal transformation, miraculous healings, and liberation from addictions, reinforce the deep conviction that glossolalia is a supernatural intervention, a tangible evidence of the presence and action of the Holy Spirit in the believer's life. In many Pentecostal and charismatic churches, glossolalia is even considered the initial evidence or the unequivocal sign of the baptism in the Holy Spirit, being a fundamental milestone in the individual's faith journey. However, as already noted in the previous chapter, it is fundamental to observe that the phenomenon does not always manifest as intelligible languages, as in biblical Pentecost. More often, vocalizations consist of sequences of sounds without a recognizable grammatical or semantic structure, which, although they may sound like a language due to their cadence and modulation, are not so to rigorous linguistic analysis. The richness, diversity, and recurrence of these historical and cultural manifestations across time demonstrate that, although the primary focus of this discussion is the biblical event of Pentecost and its theological implications, the phenomenon of speaking in tongues is a complex and multifaceted aspect of human experience. It challenges the predefined boundaries between the sacred and the secular, psychology, and divine intervention, compelling us to deepen our understanding beyond superficial appearances and to consider multiple perspectives. Science, in its relentless quest to unravel the mysteries of the world and the human mind, has a specific name for the phenomenon of producing vocalizations that resemble a language, but have not been acquired through conventional learning: glossolalia. In the field of linguistics, the first step is to apply its rigorous analytical tools, phonetics, morphology, syntax, and semantics, to try and decipher these sounds. Through extensive analysis of glossolalia recordings, both in religious contexts and in controlled laboratory studies, the vast majority of language experts agree that, in general, glossolalic vocalizations do not exhibit the complex, consistent, and systematic characteristics of a natural human language. Although they may sound persuasively like a language, with variations in pitch, rhythm, intonation, and even some syllable repetitions that give an impression of vocabulary or linguistic patterns, these vocalizations typically lack a fixed and predictable set of grammatical rules, or a semantically stable vocabulary that allows for the communication of complex and meaningful ideas between speakers. In simpler terms, it's not a language one can learn in a language course, translate into another language consistently, or that a native speaker of any known language can understand and use for communication effectively. This does not diminish the depth of the practitioner's subjective experience. but it places glossolalia in a distinct category from the languages we use to interact and convey information in a conventional way. It is at this crucial point that neuroscience enters the scene, with the ambition of uncovering what actually happens in a person's brain while they practice glossolalia. Thanks to exponential advances in brain imaging technologies, such as functional magnetic resonance imaging and positron emission tomography, pioneering researchers have been able to observe and map brain activity in real time during episodes of glossolalia. Notable studies like those conducted by Dr. Andrew Newberg and his team at the University of Pennsylvania have revealed intriguing brain activity patterns that are significantly distinct from those observed during normal speech or conventional prayer in a known language. During glossolalia, a significant decrease in activity was consistently observed in the prefrontal cortex, an area of the brain strongly associated with planning, language control, logical reasoning, decision-making, volition, and self-awareness. This finding is particularly relevant as it suggests that the production of glossolalia is not an act of conscious volition or planning, but rather a more spontaneous, almost uninhibited experience where usual cognitive control is attenuated, allowing speech to flow in a more automatic and less controlled manner. Additionally, while classically known language areas such as Broca's area and Wernicke's area did show some activity during glossolalia, this activity was not identical or as robust as that observed when a person speaks in their native language or a learned foreign language. This reinforces the idea that glossolalia operates through distinct brain mechanisms from those involved in conventional communicative language. These findings raise fascinating and complex questions. Could glossolalia be an innate capacity of the human brain to generate rhythmic and melodic vocalizations in an altered state of consciousness, a kind of subconscious language? Or is there still a transcendent element at play, whose physical manifestation is mediated by brain processes that we are only just beginning to fully comprehend? Science offers powerful tools to investigate the how and what of glossolalia, uncovering its observable mechanisms, but the mystery of its ultimate why and its ultimate meaning continues to be a fertile ground for reflection, inviting an even deeper look into the complex interaction between mind, body, and spirit. If glossolalia, in its most common manifestation, does not fit the definition of a learned language and does not always present itself as xenolalia, what then compels the human mind to produce it? One of the most fascinating aspects of glossolalia, when analyzed through the lens of social psychology and the sociology of religion, is the powerful influence of autosuggestion, altered states of consciousness, and the predominant role of the social environment and collective expectation. In many religious contexts where glossolalia is practiced, particularly in Pentecostal and charismatic services, but also in other mystical and spiritual traditions, an atmosphere of great fervor and a clear expectation, sometimes even subtle or explicit pressure, for believers to receive this spiritual gift is observed. Engaging music, often with repetitive and hypnotic rhythms, loud and unison prayers, moving testimonies from other practitioners who have already experienced it, and strong charismatic spiritual leadership, which encourages and validates the practice, create an immersive and conducive environment for the individual to fully surrender to the experience. In this scenario of sensory immersion and intense expectation, the human mind proves remarkably susceptible to suggestion, especially in states of high emotion, profound belief, or in environments that promote an altered state of consciousness. In a state of trance or religious ecstasy, which can be induced by a range of factors, such as hyperventilation, physical exhaustion from long hours of worship, intense focus on repetitive rituals, or simply the ardent expectation of an intense and supernatural spiritual experience itself, the normal cognitive barriers that control speech and rational thought can significantly decrease. This allows the individual to produce vocalizations that would not be generated in a common, rational state of consciousness. It is crucial to understand that, for the vast majority of practitioners, this is not conscious deception, deliberate imitation, or intentional manipulation. On the contrary, it is a spontaneous process where the mind, immersed in a context of intense spiritual and emotional expectation, releases speech patterns that are subjectively perceived as a language and, objectively, resemble a language. It is a complex psychosomatic phenomenon where the mind and body interact profoundly in response to internal stimuli and external ones. Extensive research in social and cognitive psychology has consistently demonstrated how belief and expectation can powerfully influence perceptions, behaviors, and even physiological responses. The well-known placebo effect is an eloquent example of how belief can generate real, physical outcomes in the absence of an active treatment or a pharmacologically inert substance. In the case of glossolalia, fervent belief in its divine origin and the genuine expectation of receiving this gift can significantly facilitate entry into a mental state where these vocalizations occur spontaneously. This perspective suggests that glossolalia can be viewed as a manifestation of the human mind's extraordinary capacity to generate intense and subjectively meaningful experiences that are shaped and colored by a specific cultural and religious context. This approach by no means seeks to discredit or devalue the depth and authenticity of the religious experience for the individual, but rather to offer an explanation for the underlying psychological and social mechanisms that allow for the emergence of glossolalia. The human mind is indeed an immensely powerful tool and a mystery in itself, capable of creating complex internal realities and manifesting deep spiritual longings through sounds that, while not conventional languages, hold immense and transformative meaning for the practitioner. Regardless of the complex theological discussions about its divine origin and the neuroscientific and psychological mechanisms by which it manifests, glossolalia exerts a profound, multifaceted, and undeniable impact on the lives of millions of people who actively practice it worldwide. In a religious context, it is frequently associated with a sense of deep intimacy and closeness to the divine, functioning as a direct, personal, and often ineffable channel of communication with the transcendent. For a vast number of believers, the act of speaking in tongues provides an indescribable inner peace, a tangible relief from the stress, anxiety, and pressures of daily life, and a profound renewal of faith and existential purpose. It is seen as a form of emotional expression that transcends the limitations of ordinary language, allowing deeper feelings, longings, and even unverbalized traumas or pains to be vocalized in a way that conventional language might not fully express. This capacity for expression without the shackles of linguistic logic can be incredibly liberating. Studies conducted in the field of the psychology of religion and sociology, focusing on Pentecostal and charismatic communities, have consistently pointed to the significant subjective benefits reported by practitioners of glossolalia. Among these benefits, notably prominent are an increase in self-esteem and a sense of personal worth driven by the belief of being a channel or recipient for the divine voice, a sense of strong belonging to a supportive and welcoming community where the experience is shared, validated, and celebrated, and an effective and adaptive way to cope with emotional difficulties, traumas, grief, losses, or personal crisis situations. Glossolalia, in this sense, can function as a powerful mechanism for emotional catharsis, allowing for the release of accumulated tensions, the expression of unconscious anxieties, and the promotion of a state of relaxation and psychological well-being. Some researchers even suggest that the rhythm, melody, and often rhythmic and repetitive nature of glossolalic vocalizations may have an effect similar to that of recited mantras or meditative chants practiced in other spiritual traditions, inducing a state of relaxation, an altered state of consciousness, and a sense of transcendence that are inherently beneficial for mental and emotional health. This dimension of glossolalia's impact as a practice that promotes mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being is crucial for a complete and nuanced understanding of the phenomenon, regardless of whether its origin is conceived as divine or as a complex product of the human mind. The undeniable fact is that it serves as a significant resource for coping strategies and for the emotional and spiritual expression of a vast number of individuals. Glossolalia can even be viewed as a form of active, embodied meditation, where the practitioner surrenders to a spontaneous flow of vocalizations that releases tension, promotes a state of profound tranquility, and strengthens their connection to their spirituality and to the sacred. In an increasingly fast-paced, stressful, fragmented world that is relentlessly searching for meaning and purpose, the demand for practices that offer comfort, connection, and a sense of existential significance is growing. Glossolalia, in this sense, emerges not only as a phenomenon of specific belief and religious practice, but also as a powerful tool for emotional self-regulation, cathartic expression, and the pursuit of well-being for those who experience it, demonstrating the complexity, richness, and multifaceted nature of human experiences and the intrinsic link between faith, mind, and holistic well-being. We now arrive at the crucial point of our journey, a territory where science and faith converge at their boundaries, and where Cartesian logic often yields to mystery, wonder, and the ineffable. Glossolalia, from its extraordinary initial account in biblical Pentecost to its meticulous and rigorous analysis in contemporary neuroscience libraries, challenges us to look beyond superficial explanations and to embrace the inherent complexity of the human experience in its totality. Science, with its powerful tools of empirical observation, controlled experimentation, and precise measurement, can indeed map brain activity, identify specific neurological patterns, analyze the phonetic structure of vocalizations, and suggest underlying psychological and social mechanisms, such as autosuggestion, the effect of religious trance, and the powerful influence of the social environment and collective expectation. It shows us undeniably, and with concrete data, that the human mind is an incredibly complex, adaptable system capable of generating vocalizations that, although not strictly fitting the conventional definitions of natural languages, are profoundly meaningful and, for many, truly transformative. However, science, by its very nature, methodology, and scope, has clear and inherent limits. It cannot, for example, prove or disprove the existence of divine intervention, a higher power, a spiritual dimension that completely transcends the material and measurable world, or even the existence of a reality beyond our sensory perception and scientific instruments. The experience of Pentecost for the devout believer and for the theologian remains a miracle, an event that challenges and transcends any purely materialistic explanation and firmly places itself in the realm of the supernatural, of the direct action of the divine in the world. For millions of people around the world, glossolalia is experienced and believed to be a direct gift from the Holy Spirit, a direct, intimate, and ineffable form of communication with the divine that is not limited by human reason, logic, or the need for intellectual comprehension. Faith, in turn, operates on a different plane from scientific knowledge, where evidence is often subjective experience, personal transformation, a sense of profound connection with the sacred, and an unwavering belief in something greater than the visible, the palpable, and the measurable. Perhaps true wisdom and the path to a more complete and holistic understanding of phenomena like glossolalia lie not in trying to fit it into a single, restrictive box of psychology or divine intervention. On the contrary, the challenge and richness lie in recognizing what each of these perspectives, the scientific and the theological, reveals about the complexity of human experience and the nature of reality itself. Glossolalia powerfully reminds us that there are dimensions of existence that escape our full rational comprehension, either because they are indeed divine and transcendental, residing beyond the limits of our capacity for measurement and analysis, or because the human mind is itself a vast, deep, and mysterious universe, far more complex than any current brain map can describe or any psychological theory can encompass in its entirety. The ineffable, that which cannot be fully expressed in words, that transcends logic and reason, is perhaps the common ground where faith and science, in their respective and valid journeys of exploration and discovery, meet. They may diverge in methods, approaches, and even conclusions, but both point to the vastness of the unknown, to that which still marvels us, deeply intrigues us, and invites us to a deeper reflection on what it means to be human and our intrinsic relationship with the mystery that permeates existence. So, is the language of Pentecost pure psychology or divine intervention? The truth is that the answer may lie in a place where mind and spirit intertwine in a complex tapestry. The mystery remains, the fascination, and the certainty that, whatever explanation we seek, glossolalia invites us to explore the limits of our own understanding. What else does the universe, or our own mind, hold that is unspeakable? This question continues to echo, instigating our curiosity.